Chapter 29. Baptism by Fire. In the stark and foreboding departure area of the Drixarian ship, Ethan stood amidst a sea of conscripts, each clad in black armor. The armor was more than just a protective shell. It had become a part of him, integrated into his very being by the Drixarians' advanced technology. It was a constant, unyielding reminder of his transformation from an ordinary young man to a soldier in a cosmic conflict far beyond his comprehension. General Thrakar, the imposing figure at the helm of the Drixarian forces, hovered above near the front of the conscripts. His presence was a dark cloud over them, a symbol of the absolute control the Empire exerted over its unwilling warriors. "Today you will engage in your first cleansing," he declared, his voice resonating with cold authority. "Your mission is to purge the planet below of all resistance. You are instruments of the Drixarian Empire's will, a necessary force to maintain our order in the galaxy." The very word cleansing sent a wave of revulsion through Ethan. He understood its true meaning, a ruthless extermination of any beings that dared stand against the Drixarians' relentless expansion. Stripped of their autonomy, the conscripts were nothing more than tools of oppression, wielded by an empire with an insatiable thirst for domination. Portals flickered to life along the walls of the departure area, creating gateways to the planet below. General Thrakar's command echoed through the chamber, a harsh directive for the conscripts to move forward. Hesitation was not tolerated. Those who did not comply were swiftly and brutally dealt with. In an instant, they were reduced to mere mounds of blood and flesh, a grim warning to the others. Ethan stepped through the portal. He was immediately engulfed in the chaos of battle. The serene view of the planet from space was a stark contrast to the reality on the ground. The air was thick with smoke, the sounds of conflict reverberating through the atmosphere. The defenders of the planet, although fiercely brave, were tragically outmatched. Their weapons, primitive compared to the advanced Drixarian technology, barely made an impact against the armor of the conscripts. Ethan, propelled into the heart of the conflict, felt a sense of detachment. The armor he wore responded to his every move with unnerving precision, turning him into an efficient instrument of war. Despite the chaos around him, he was eerily aware of the disparity in power. The defenders' desperate attempts to protect their home were met with the cold, calculated efficiency of the Drixarian assault. The battlefield was a maelstrom of destruction, a testament to the Drixarians' ruthless pursuit of dominance. Buildings crumbled under the onslaught, and the air was filled with the cries of the fallen. Ethan moved through the chaos, an unwilling participant in the carnage. As he fired upon the defenders, Ethan's mind was torn. Each pull of the trigger was a betrayal of his own humanity. Each life he took a weight on his conscience. He was trapped in a role he never wanted, forced to act against his own morals. Amidst the relentless advance of the Drixarian forces, Ethan witnessed moments of poignant bravery. Defenders shielded their loved ones, facing their end with defiance. These acts of courage amidst despair struck a chord within him, a painful reminder of the cost of this so-called cleansing, but the battle raged on, the Drixarian conscript forces pushing forward with relentless thirst. Ethan, caught in the tide of violence, continued to fight, driven by the instinct to survive. But deep within, his resolve to resist the Drixarians' control grew stronger. He knew he couldn't allow himself to become a mere tool in their hands. He had to find a way to fight back, not just for his own sake, but for all those who had no voice in this brutal conquest. The cleansing of the planet was a harrowing experience for Ethan, a forced initiation into the horrors of interstellar warfare. It was a role thrust upon him against his will, an injustice and cruelty witnessed on the battlefield. Ethan, driven forward by the orders ingrained into him, fired his weapon, each shot betraying his own sense of morality. The battle around him was a storm of destruction, an overwhelming onslaught against the defenders who were struggling to protect their home. The sights and sounds of the battle were a nightmare come to life. Ethan witnessed scenes of merciless slaughter, the defenders falling one by one to the overwhelming might of the Drixarian forces. His role in this atrocity filled him with horror and self-loathing. As he fought, Ethan's movements were automatic, guided by survival instincts rather than allegiance to the Drixarians. The integrated armor responded to his every command, making him a more effective soldier but deepening the sense of alienation he felt from his own humanity. The cleansing of the planet was a brutal initiation for Ethan, a forced participation in an act of genocide. It marked the erosion of his innocence and the beginning of a grim reality as a conscript in the Drixarian war efforts. Within the relentless battle, amid the thunder of weapons and the cries of the fallen, Ethan's thoughts unexpectedly drifted to his life before this nightmare. He remembered the long hours spent in the digital realm, where social media had been his world, his reality. He recalled how that virtual existence had gradually consumed him, leading him to seek the voluntary departure program, a decision he believed would end his suffering, but instead delivered him into a fate far worse than he could have imagined. The irony of his situation was not lost on him. He had sought an escape from a life where he felt purposeless, dominated by a virtual addiction that had stripped away his sense of self. And now, here he was, on a distant planet, a pawn in an interstellar conflict, fighting a war that was not his own. His life, once spent in the pursuit of digital validation, had been forcibly exchanged for a struggle for survival in the most literal sense. Ethan realized that his previous life struggles with social media addiction seemed trivial compared to the harsh reality he now faced. Where he had once sought an end to his life due to a lack of purpose, he now found himself clinging to life with a newfound determination. The irony was cruel. In his search for death, he had found a reason to live, albeit in the most harrowing circumstances. As he maneuvered through the battlefield, each step was a fight for survival, a defiance of the fate the Drixarians had imposed upon him. No longer was he battling for likes or recognition in the digital world. He was fighting for his very existence, for the chance to see another day. This brutal introduction to the realities of war, of life and death, had awakened something within Ethan. The numbness that had once enveloped him in his addiction was gone, replaced by an acute awareness of the preciousness of life. He understood now that purpose was not something to be found in the curated feeds of social media, but something forged in the trials and tribulations of real experiences. As the battle waned and the Drixarian forces secured their hold over the planet, Ethan felt a deep sense of sorrow for the lives lost and the destruction wrought. In the relentless series of battles and cleansings, Ethan and his fellow conscripts faced not only the horrors of war, but also the mental and emotional toll it exacted. The constant exposure to violence and the pressure of serving an oppressive regime had a devastating impact on many of the conscripts. A significant number, at least a third more, were lost, not to the enemy, but to the mental anguish that drove them to acts of desperation. Among the conscripts, incidents of mental breakdowns became increasingly common. Some, unable to cope with the relentless brutality, lashed out in their anguish. Tragic scenes unfolded where conscripts turned their weapons against each other, or even attempted to strike out at their Drixarian rulers. Each instance ended the same way: the quick flick of a holographic screen by a Drixarian officer, and the ominous sound of a trumpet signaling the immediate disintegration of the offending conscript. At times it even had the rhythm of an orchestra. Ethan witnessed these events with a growing sense of despair. The sound of the trumpet had become a grim reminder of their hopeless situation. It was not just the physical danger of the battles that posed a threat. It was also the mental and emotional strain that could lead to a sudden, violent end at the hands of their captors. One evening, after another harrowing day, Ethan and his friends gathered in their common area, the mood more somber than usual. Jackson broke the silence, his voice tinged with grief. "It's not just the battles that are killing us. It's the hopelessness, the constant fear. Some just can't take it anymore." Maria nodded solemnly. "Every time I hear that trumpet, it's like a part of me dies. We're fighting two wars, one against the planets we're forced to cleanse, and the other against the despair in our own minds." Ethan felt the weight of her words. The war was taking its toll in ways he hadn't imagined when he first found himself trapped in this nightmare. "We have to stay strong for each other," he said, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. "We can't let them break us, not completely." The atmosphere aboard the Draxarian ship shifted dramatically as ultraviolet alarms began to blare throughout the vessel. The piercing sound and flashing lights sent waves of panic across the ship, affecting everyone on board. For the first time, Ethan saw something he never thought he would witness: fear in the eyes of the Draxarians. It was a fear that quickly spread, contagious and unnerving, even among the hardened conscripts. Ethan and his friends, caught in the midst of this unexpected chaos, tried to make sense of the situation. They had never experienced an alarm like this before. The usual order and discipline of the ship gave way to a frenzied confusion. Then, from Zahak's throne room, a startling event unfolded. Through the grand doors, an endless wave of figures began to pour into the room. They were conscripts, but unlike any Ethan had seen before. They moved with purpose and coordination, their weapons at the ready, a stark contrast to the disarray around them. What caught Ethan's attention most was the emblem emblazoned on their chests, a phoenix with a sword standing proudly behind it. The symbol was striking, imbued with a sense of power and defiance. These conscripts were different. They exuded a presence that was both intimidating and awe-inspiring. Ethan, Maria, Jackson, and the others watched in stunned silence as these new conscripts filled the room and then spilled into the hallways. The presence of these warriors, marked by the phoenix emblem, seemed to signify a turning point, a shift in the balance of power aboard the ship. The group exchanged uncertain glances. "Who are they?" Maria whispered, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. Jackson shook his head, equally baffled. "I've never seen conscripts like these before. Look at them. They're organized, confident. And that emblem—" Ethan felt a surge of curiosity and a flicker of hope. Could these be rebels, he wondered, conscripts who had found a way to resist the Draxarians? The symbol of the phoenix suggested a rebirth, a rising from the ashes. Could this be a sign of a potential uprising, a chance to fight back against their oppressors? As the phoenix emblazoned conscripts moved with precision through the ship, Ethan and his friends realized that they were witnessing a pivotal moment. The dynamics aboard the ship were changing rapidly, and they needed to decide how to react. Should they join these new conscripts, align themselves with what appeared to be a force of resistance? Or should they remain cautious, observing from a distance until they understood more about this new development? The ship's communication system crackled to life, and a firm, confident voice echoed through the corridors. "This is Commander Cora. The ship is now occupied by the Space Lords. All conscripts are advised to stand down and do nothing. Draxarians wishing to live should show no aggression. You will survive." The announcement coming from the conscripts with the Phoenix emblem sent a wave of astonishment and confusion through the ranks of both the conscripts and the Draxarians. Ethan and the other conscripts processed this startling development. Another message came through, this time from the Draxarian command. It was a stark command to fight against the Space Lords or face immediate destruction. The message was clear, but it placed the conscripts in a dire predicament. Almost immediately, the haunting sound of the trumpet echoed through the ship. It was the sound they had come to dread, the sound of conscripts being eliminated. Panic began to set in. The fear of being the next target hung in their thoughts. Ethan's friends, caught in the maelstrom of fear and uncertainty, turned to him. "What do we do, Ethan?" Maria asked, her voice tinged with fear. "We can't just stand here. But who are these Space Lords? Can we trust them?" Ethan, though unsure himself, knew they had to make a decision quickly. "They're probably targeting anyone who hasn't drawn their weapons," he deduced, trying to stay calm under pressure. "Draw your weapons now, but we don't have to fight. We just need to show we're not a threat to the Space Lords." His friends nodded, and they all drew their weapons, the weight of the decision heavy in their hands. Jackson, gripping his weapon, voiced what they all felt. "I don't want to fight against these Space Lords. Anyone standing up to the Draxarians is on the right side in my book." Ethan quickly devised a plan. Let's face the back wall in the common area, weapons at the ready. We won't attack, but we'll also show we're complying with the Turd-Ysseys. They moved into position, their backs to the entrance, weapons pointed toward the back wall. It was a silent act of defiance, a non-verbal statement of their stance. As minutes ticked by, other conscripts in the room took notice. Understanding the intention behind this act, they too followed suit. Soon, thousands of conscripts were lined up in a similar fashion, a silent army showing their defiance against the Turd-Ysseys and a hopeful sign of support for the Space Lords. This act of collective resistance was powerful, as the conscripts, each battling their own fears, had come together in a moment of silent rebellion. Ethan felt a surge of pride and hope. They might not know what the future held or who the Space Lords truly were, but in this moment, they had chosen to stand up for what they felt was right. It was a small victory, but in the oppressive environment of the Turd-Ysseys ship, it was a significant one. The battle for control of the Turd-Ysseys ship stretched on for days, a relentless struggle that raged through the corridors and compartments of the massive vessel. Ethan's act of defiance in the common area had sparked a movement among the conscripts. What started with Ethan and his friends soon swelled as word spread, their method of passive resistance becoming a silent but powerful statement. The common area, once a place for brief respite between battles, transformed into a symbol of unity and defiance. Nearly 100,000 conscripts gradually filled the space, all standing with their backs to the entrance, weapons drawn but not raised in aggression. This silent army stood in stark contrast to the violence that engulfed the rest of the ship. Ethan watched as more and more conscripts joined them, each new arrival a testament to the growing resistance against the Turd-Ysseys. The atmosphere in the common area was tense. Despite the uncertainty of their situation, there was a sense of solidarity that had been absent before. As the conflict with the Space Lords continued, the conscripts' passive resistance became a beacon of hope. Rumors and whispers about the Space Lords circulated among them, many expressing a cautious optimism that these mysterious figures could be the catalyst for change, for an end to their servitude. Ethan, witnessing his growing movement, felt a sense of pride and purpose. What had begun as a desperate attempt to avoid execution had turned into something much larger, a collective stand against oppression. It was a risky strategy, but it was their way of fighting back. The days passed, and the battle for the ship reached a critical point. The Space Lords, with their phoenix emblems, continued to gain ground, their presence a symbol of resistance and hope. The Turd-Ysseys, faced with an internal rebellion and an external assault, began to lose their grip on control. As the Space Lords continued their relentless advance, the Turd-Ysseys' control over the ship began to crumble. The resistance that had started as a spark in the common area had ignited a fire of defiance throughout the vessel. It wasn't long before the Space Lords emerged victorious, seizing control of the ship from the Turd-Ysseys. In the aftermath, Ethan and his group of conscripts, along with the rest of the ship's conscript population, were gathered in the vast departure area. The mood was tense but expectant, a sense of hope filling the air. They watched as Cora, a leader among the Space Lords, ascended the floating platform that the Turd-Ysseys had once used to assert their dominance. In a symbolic gesture of their newfound freedom, Cora held up the severed head of General Thrakar, the tyrant who had embodied their oppression. Her voice resounded through the departure area, strong and clear. "You are free from the cruelty of Turd-Ysseys rule," she declared, casting General Thrakar's head into the void. The act was met with a mix of shock and relief, a physical representation of the end of their subjugation. Cora then addressed the gathered conscripts, her gaze sweeping over the sea of faces. "You are no longer forced to serve as instruments of war. The choice is yours now. You can't return to your normal human lives. Too much has changed, both within you and in the universe. But you can choose to evolve, to become guardians of the universe, protectors of the innocent." Her words stirred something within Ethan and his friends. The idea of becoming guardians, of using their experiences and abilities for a greater purpose, was a beacon of hope in the darkness that had enveloped their lives. Cora continued. Joining the Space Lords is a choice, not a compulsion. We fight for freedom, for justice, against oppressors like the Draxarians. We offer you a chance to be part of something greater, to make a difference in the galaxy. Ethan felt a surge of purpose, a sense of direction that had been missing since his abduction. The horrors he had witnessed and the battles he had fought had changed him irrevocably. The idea of becoming a guardian, of protecting others from experiencing the same fate, resonated deeply with him. Around him, he saw similar expressions on the faces of his fellow conscripts. They had been through hell and back, but now they had a chance to use their experiences for a noble cause. The departure area, once a place of dread and despair, was now filled with a sense of possibility. The conscripts who had once been victims now had the opportunity to become protectors, to join the ranks of the Space Lords and fight for a cause they believed in. As Cora concluded her speech, the conscripts were left to ponder their next steps. For Ethan and many others, the choice was clear. They would join the Space Lords, embrace their new identities as guardians of the universe, and stand against any force that threatened freedom.